Welcome, everyone. So, this is our first video for the community Feel Your Way to Freedom. And my name is Steve, and this is my friend Joe.
Hi everyone.
And just before we begin, I just want to remind you that you can download the school app onto your phone because it is so much easier. You don't have to log in, and it's just easy access to the community. So, and the links are also there, I think, in the category called announcement. You can find it there. So I guess we can just begin, right? Every week we're gonna answer questions, and you can submit questions in the Ask a Question category. Okay, so let me find the first one. Okay. So this question comes from Ben Arbor. So, abstraction from reality. When I use words like I to talk about non-duality, part of me feels like I'm reinforcing the illusion. But when I avoid using I, it feels like another layer of performance. Since all language is an abstraction from reality, anyways, is avoiding I actually a deeper illusion than just using it? It's an interesting question.
Yeah, and I think everything that he said in the question is true at different, parts of depending on what you're experiencing. Um, I definitely think when your relationship to the self or I starts to change, then I think it can be very helpful to well, I think it maybe is natural to start thinking about, like what is this I that I'm using to represent this self that I'm starting to see is this construction that is an illusion in my mind. And then saying things like, this body to represent the thing that is arising within the experience might be more helpful when that's your experience. But obviously, it can be very dependent on what you're going through. I think that's valid, of course. And then that might shift again. And then the term I just becomes very benign. And just as anyone who's not going through some kind of self-realization, you're just using it because language is limited. It is an abstraction of experience. Um, and then I think only when you're in that period of really dismantling what's happening do the terms like the body, this, what is arising, really help you sort of push through that. Um, and then it's just sort of sounds like nonsense either side of it as well. Um,
Yeah.
I know that was definitely my experience for a time when uh, I started to relate to people who use that kind of language. I was like, it is actually quite helpful for me to remove myself from this term that has defined the self for my entire life up until now.
Yeah. And I think that you said something about, well, at least I heard it that way, that you kind of have to embrace all of the experiences. So
Yeah.
sometimes you're going to feel that what you are, what this I is, consciousness, or I'm the body. Sometimes you can use the word I. But what I find interesting is that whatever it is, you have to embrace. So if sometimes you don't want to use the word I and it feels like a performance, like, oh, I'm so special, I'm so spiritual now that I can't even say I to refer to me. If that feels awkward and that feels kind of ridiculous, then there's a little bit of judgment there, which is not, it's not bad. And therefore, you can explore that even by yourself. I think a lot of people kind of talk to themselves. I think it's more common than people think. And so, even if you're talking to yourself, play with that like you're speaking to someone else. Oh, I don't know exactly how they would refer to themselves because I've never done that myself. But especially if it feels awkward or embarrassing or ridiculous to say the body or to say, I can't use the word I, explore how that feels. And then at another time, use the word I like everybody else does. The point here is that these are kind of all parts of the ego, both the one that is ordinary, that just, uses the word I like everybody else, and the one that wants to be kind of fancy and spiritual. And ultimately, none of them are real. And whatever we have an issue with, so it's like the part of you that thinks it's performance, probably that's the one that needs to be explored a little bit more. And when you explore it enough, you'll see that it's just as kind of an illusion as the other one. It's like in the end, it doesn't matter. It's like what's happening now, just do that, what feels natural, and that's it.
Yeah. And the part about s- the sort of active avoidance of I being a deeper illusion than just using it, I think that's a good thing to mention because if the ego thinks there's something special or like you can activate something, you know, have an insight or some major thing will happen if you resist using the term I, then you can notice that you're doing that. You know,
Yeah.
if you think that doing that adds something to your experience because it's special, then that would be something to know as well.
Yeah. And I was just gonna add that ultimately all of this stuff is supposed to just be fun. And
Yeah.
it's kind of like playing almost like a kid. And so, maybe even I could try that because I've never really explored that. It hasn't been something that I'm attracted to. But if I were to feel that it's a little silly, I wouldn't be like, oh, I'm not going to say that. I would just say it and see what do I feel. It's like I want to say never be afraid to be ridiculous, but actually you can. I mean, just you can be afraid. Everything is allowed, basically, right?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point about the being fun because it can all seem so incredibly serious and it's just
Yeah.
really not, you know, at the end of the day, it's to be enjoyed. Yeah.
And the final thing, and then we'll go to the next question. Um, After all of that, if you explore all that, you'll realize that the word I is just the most convenient and the easiest way to refer to you, right?
Mhm.
That's it. It's just so easy. Okay. So the next question. Okay. So this is from Tony. Let me just open the question. So working with repressed anger. I've been struggling with anger for all of my life. It's not that I don't get angry, but I have to really reach my limits to do so. And when I do, I feel like a 5-year-old. I seem to lose almost, sorry, I just have to open it here, to lose almost all reason and tend to say things I regret. Plus, I seem to lose almost every argument when I get angry because I'm unreasonable. An earlier therapist of mine would have me lay down on a bed, punch pillows, and scream in order to release pent-up anger. But I felt like this only made things worse as I would still hate my anger, but was also very explosive and short-tempered. I tried his approach for 8 months and stopped because I felt like punching a wall whenever I got even a little bit upset, and I never felt good, even after yelling, screaming, or punching something. I realized later that even though I was expressing my anger, I was still very resistant to it. I've identified some of the reasons why I'm suppressing my anger, which are I'll be attacked, therefore I'm unsafe. I'll hurt the other person, I'm a bad person. And what I realized recently is that I can't separate the emotion of anger from its expression. Any ideas on how to approach this? Um, okay, I'm just going to look at it because it was a little bit long, but it's interesting. See, again, I'm gonna have to think a little bit because I haven't had this experience, but I know that as we keep thinking, it'll come to me. Um, because the part that I want to focus on is he says I tried his approach, which is punching and yelling and expressing, and yet something still seems stuck. Like it's like he said, I can't separate the emotion from the what is it from its expression. Do you have something? I don't have something in this moment.
Yeah, well, the I think the initial thought that I have is just maybe the level of ego judgment for anger specifically is very pronounced. So
Yeah.
even though you've done a lot of work with this anger, um, but it, you know, it takes you to get to this tipping point, um, to for it to come up and to be accessible. I guess just shows how far down it's been pushed. And I also, which again points to that it's a lot of work to do. You know, if it's been that suppressed for your entire life, 8 months of this kind of like anger work, I'm not saying it's not a lot, but it could be a portion of a much larger amount to do before it becomes more accessible. But there are indications that it's become accessible as well. When there was the part about uh, getting triggered very easily.
Yeah,
That to me sounds like a very good thing because it's there ready to come, but you still have the ego judgment of it being a bad thing, and that you probably feel bad because you were an angry person. Whereas, of course, that's not true. You just have anger and you're ready to release it. So I initially, well, I still do interpret that in a good way. You've done 8 months of the kind of
yeah,
work that does allow you to access anger. There's still a big amount of ego judgment present. I think that's normal for being a particular, someone who suppresses anger in particular. Um, so although there's a lot of this is wrong, this isn't good, I don't feel good, the actual things that you've said all sounded very good to me, that you've done eight
yeah,
months of like exactly what you should be doing to access your anger is releasing it physically in a safe space. Um, but the discomfort and the pain is that the ego is very it particularly does not like to see itself being an angry person, and that will just take a long time to change. And it's not about willing it to change. It won't change other than through this kind of release. I just think about myself with suppressed anger, and I used to judge people who showed anger. I was like, that's pathetic. You know, I can't believe how pathetic that is. And obviously that's because I had a lot of suppressed anger that I had to let out. That was my ego's judgment of myself. Should I have been an angry person? So that answer will probably be very unsatisfactory to the ego because it will want something that will calm it and make it feel better. But my reading of that is that you're doing exactly what you should, and that there's just a lot of judgment coming from it, and that continuing on that and being able to release in a safe space. Again, it's more ego judgment that you have these arguments because you're releasing anger in person with another person, and anger is completely irrational. I don't think anyone's going to win any arguments when they're in a cloud of anger being released. So if you can have enough distance in those moments internally where you recognize that anger is coming up, however it manifests for you, whether it's contractions in your body or whatever it is, you can remove yourself from the situation if possible and do whatever you want. Say, like, the worst things imaginable about the person who's annoyed you, or the kind of work that you're doing, beating a pillow, being physical in any way. And it's really about getting to the depth, when you almost shock yourself. You're not doing this to anyone, of course, you're just really letting it come up. And I can again say from my experience, you will hit these uh, ceilings or floors when you're like, oh my God, I didn't realize that that was in me. And then there's another one, and then there's another one. But it's a very long time. So, like I said, 8 months, it's a lot, but there could be plenty more.
yeah. The first thing that I just thought of is because he mentions that he has probably exploded at people a few
Mhm.
times,
Yeah,
this creates there's even more hesitation to feel anger even if he's alone
yeah,
because of a memory that if I feel this and if I act in this way, I hurt people and it's wrong. I mean, not wrong, but it's not ideal to be hurting people with your anger. And so that's the first little confusion. And yes, in the moments when you are alone and you're full of rage, if those thoughts come up, yes, it's difficult because they make you feel afraid to feel the anger. It's never going to change. But ultimately, in those moments, you just have to have a little bit of courage when you're alone to feel the rage, right? It's whenever we're doing this stuff especially in like more in the beginning, there is resistance, and they will come in the form of thoughts saying you shouldn't be doing this, you're going to hurt somebody, you're a bad person. You literally have to listen, like just hear the thoughts in your mind and then do the action. And it's interesting that I can talk about this stuff because I've done it so much that that's why I'm like, what do I do in those moments? So the first thing that comes to mind, I'm just trying to read here again. Okay, so like I'm trying to picture this 8 months, but then basically what he's saying, I think, is that he did that for 8 months and then he continues to be someone that is full of rage and will snap at people in a second, right? And so that tells me first that there's a giant amount, sort of, I think, similar to me, of suppressed anger. But the first thing that I want to say is in those moments when you feel that energy, it's fresh, it's right there, and you're alone, right? The you can only feel something completely if you're alone because you're not going to be afraid and worried that somebody's around, somebody's going to hear you. So what I do, especially if it's at the highest level of rage, is there's something that you're going to have to do physically. Um, I'm trying to remember like the moments when I had so much rage, I would have to do this thing like 5 times. What I'm basically saying is, it goes even beyond just punching because sometimes you can, that's good. But I think when it's just like unbearable, you almost just want to tighten your whole body, but like to the maximum where you do it like for 20 seconds that you kind of lose energy and you don't have the strength to keep doing it. But when the rage is gigantic, I'd have to do that 5 times and I'd have to breathe because my heart rate would, but it would go very high. And then I'd breathe for a minute or two and literally I'm like, I'm getting ready for the next one. I'm getting ready for the second one. And to be as clear and practical as possible, what I would do to embody just how much I want to destroy the world. I would, everything. My face has to become almost like a demon in pure, like you just want your face is like I want to destroy the world and I have zero empathy. And so when you do all of this stuff and I mean you could scream if nobody can hear you. You have to kind of use your imagination. How can I express this a little bit more in that moment while being safe physically, of course? And so how that works is if you need 5 different explosions, that's how it goes. It's like you're gonna do something, you're gonna say something, then it's like too much. You do like 10, 20 seconds, then you stop and you breathe. Your heart, it's going very fast. Then when you feel a little bit more calm, you can still feel, no, I still have rage. It's still here. And then you do it again and again. For me, I think the most was 5 times. Usually it's not that many times anymore. And what I also want to say that's very specific is the more that you work with your anger and this is you becoming familiar, this is going to happen over and over. You know that it's working when in that moment that you want to explode and you do that practice over and over, you're going to feel the rage like it's this big. Then you did one explosion, it'll do this. Then a second explosion, this. Then, like the final one, you're like, yeah, there's not much here, but there's still something. And then you do that one. And then you're like, okay, I think I'm good for now. And you can feel it just like a fuel or a fire it just completely like disappears and then you're like okay, I'm fine. That's when you know that you were able to work with all of the rage that was in that moment and then you basically burned through that amount. But like we've said, like I've said in my videos, there is so much of it, especially if you suppressed it your entire life like me. I never felt anger, so thousands and thousands of times I suppressed my anger, so there's really a huge amount.
Yeah. And the ego, of course, will probably be judging you as you're doing it. So you can just
Yeah.
remember that you're doing it. It doesn't say anything about the person that you are, and you can enjoy it. It's a way for you to get this out. And if you manage to do the things that Steve said, there's almost like a flow state element to it where you just get in the rhythm and the things that want to be said will just fly out of your mouth. And the more you let them and the darker they become, the more you're tapping into what's really there. And it says nothing about good, bad, whatever.
Yeah. Isn't it an interesting thing how doing something, you're just literally working with your imagination. If you're alone and nobody can hear you and see you, you're working with your imagination. And so that shows you how much we are programmed to think that the mind is the most real. If nobody's being hurt by what you're doing, then how can it like you said something that's I was trying to connect to that. Like how can the resistance of it is so strong that you're just using your imagination and your ego is saying this is dangerous, right?
Mm,
Imagine that I'm sitting here and then I just imagine that there's a fire. That's not going to create a fire. And so it's sort of like believing that if I just think about a fire enough, I'm just going to lit on, burst into flames, which is impossible. And so it just shows you the power of the mind.
exactly, yeah.
Okay, let me go to the next one. Okay. So this is from Beate. Heart chakra. About a month ago, I experienced kundalini in the middle of the night. A few days prior, I felt my heart opening. However, I had to stop kundalini as I felt my upper body, top of my arms, will explode. Obviously, there is a blockage. Since then, I have lots of instances when I go back to my avoidant state and I absolutely have no feelings of love towards anyone, even my daughter. It brings tears in my eyes and I am frustrated. In moments like that, I try to connect with my heart, but nothing is happening. It feels like there is no love inside of me. But then when I am back in my anxious side, it is easy for me to feel love and access those good feelings. Any idea how to work with that? How do I open my heart chakra or what is happening? Well, do you have something?
Well, I guess the thing that I think of first is that there's, like a sort of rejection of the, this coldness that comes up, and of course that's understandable. Being in a state of supposed, like lovelessness is very distressing, especially because that's the kind of thing that would really make the ego point to I'm a bad person. I don't even have love for my daughter in this moment. But what we want to get to is a place of real heart opening, which is to accept that which is happening because it's required. It's not any better or worse than the other side. It's just part of um, the process of what's happening. And the resistance to that is what's causing the distress. It's like this is a state I find myself in. But real openness, which can't be forced, by the way, you cannot choose to suddenly be open to something that you don't feel open to. But real openness comes when you allow all of yourself, which includes states of having no love for anyone, for being
Yeah.
the worst person you could possibly imagine, not in action, but in feeling or perceived, persona. It's allowing that will be the thing that takes you to a place of true openness.
Yeah. And I just want to say that even to share that, like most people it would be very difficult to say even for
Yeah,
my own daughter. So
that's
that's
so
like
true.
that shows like an openness and actually a lot of
Yeah,
maturity.
yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah, I mean, it's just a good piece of evidence for yourself that you have enough openness, enough real love, which is just non-judgmental acceptance of what is, for yourself to
yeah,
be able to write those words. And there's empathy there for yourself. So, that's, yeah, it's just kind of evidence that there's um an open heart.
yeah. And I was just gonna talk about an analogy because this is an interesting topic of, I think it's happened so much in the spiritual community, what people think love is versus what it actually is. And
Yeah.
it is so, so much deeper than what people think, and therefore there's a confusion. Um, so the what most people think is that to be loving is to be kind. which is part of it. You know, if you're kind and respectful, you could say I'm a loving person. But love goes so much deeper than that. And the only way I can describe it is using the analogy of your body is like, you know, you could think of a container or a womb. And the body, if the body is absolutely loving, unconditionally loving, that's like a container. So the container is absolutely loving, but inside of the container, anything can happen because that's unconditional love. So if inside the container there's absolute hatred for humanity that wants to destroy people, right, and has no empathy, there's no feelings, that love holds the hatred inside like that and will not judge it. That's what love actually is. So this is the confusion that to be loving is to just to feel wonderful things all the time. That's a very shallow love. It's only nice to people who are nice, right? That's not love at all. And so what I was going to say is, though this is sometimes I'm like, is this like too much? But you know, that's the point of this community to go deep. So that particular thing, so she says, I have absolutely no feeling of love towards anyone, even my daughter. So, how you basically act as this container that allows anything is to explore in those moments because that's what's happening in that moment, right? It's already happening. So, let's say that right now Beata is feeling that for the next, I don't know, 30 minutes, hour, it doesn't matter how long. That's already happening. So, it's not like something that can be changed. So, if it's here right now, it is very scary to do this because it's going to challenge many things. But what does that, if that was a character in a movie or in a book, what would that character say? And again, it would be very scary. You don't have to say things because that might be too extreme to say something about your daughter. You don't have to do that. But what would it say exactly? And I can imagine, and I can do a little bit of it now. It would be something like, I don't feel love for anyone. Yeah, even my daughter, I don't feel anything. I don't feel anything. Who cares? Why should I feel something? So something like that, you would play with it. And your imagination, and probably it would be very scary if you actually went there, maybe you'd start like shaking a little bit because it's such a different experience because that's embodying a part of you that has no empathy, right? It's almost like a little bit of a psychopath where there's no feelings, it doesn't care about anyone. And so when you use your imagination, if you did this, you could do it for like literally 10 seconds if it's too scary and stop, but then you'd go back to it maybe whenever it happens. And then you'd see like how unfeeling is it? How cold is it? What if I say this? What if I say that? And that's you loving that part of you that can't love. That's what real love is. And it's this sort of practice that is the ultimate authenticity. There's nothing more authentic than that. But authenticity, true authenticity when it comes to stuff like this is extremely difficult. In the beginning, there's going to be a lot of fear and the judgment will probably be huge that you're a bad person, you're evil. You know, a mother can only love a daughter at, you know, every second of their life. Um, but then that if you explore that until you become comfortable with it, that's kind of scary for the ego. Once you become comfortable, when it arises, when you're very cold and you become comfortable, it means that you no longer judge that part. And even after, so like this is sort of the progress. The beginning will be scary, tons of resistance, but if you keep trying, eventually when you become familiar enough and it's comfortable, it will keep coming because now you would think, right? You would think, "Oh, it's going to be gone when I do that." But in reality, if it's been suppressed your whole life, once there's no resistance, it's almost like that part of you is now comfortable coming up to you. It's no longer going to be afraid of you. So it might actually arise more than ever. And then you just explore it more and more. And it really does become like acting, like you're becoming an actress. You know, you're this loving mother, but then right now, what if I become this absolutely cold mother that doesn't, and explore that.
Yeah. And I'll just add that the answers that we are giving are probably likely to not sound like what you want to hear. And
Yeah.
the that's a good thing to notice. It's like, is what's being said resonating but leading to discomfort? Like, I don't want to do that. That puts my um idea about myself. I believe that I am a good person, or I am this, or I am that, and what's being said here is not compatible with that. I'm not saying anything like dramatic has to happen, but it's a good thing to notice if there's resistance just arising, just tension, um, because that noticing will be very helpful as well.
Yeah. And there's another part of the question when she said, heart chakra, that was the title.
Mhm.
Um, I just wanted to say, I don't know, do you think we should, it's like there's so many things we could say, but just to maybe just say this is our first video that there are many things in the spiritual community that hopefully we will demystify, which means something that people think is very real and oh this is important, like the chakra system. Um, we don't think that that's very useful to think of having these chakras. It's almost like a mental thing. Oh, I have these energy points. And then she said, how do you open your heart chakra? Well, I've talked to her before. It's already happening. If you think about your heart opening, you could think of it as when you start crying every time. So it's like when you when you're so authentic with how much pain you're in and you're willing to say I'm in so much pain and then you feel emotional and you start crying, that is opening your heart. And so I think that even what I talked about before about embracing that cold part of you. In the moment, it probably is not going to lead to tears, but eventually, once you learn to love such a part of yourself that everybody would judge so harshly, if you actually explore that enough, that is you developing such a deep love for yourself that eventually it will lead to tears. Meaning, like, if you think about it, let's say that this part, right, the cold mother that doesn't feel anything, it's been rejected so much that that's a portion of you that is in suffering. And so if you learn to love that part of you and it's sort of like it has been accepted, that is a portion of you that can almost feel more. And then that can lead to tears, right? And so I think that's pretty much it. I think what you're already doing, Beata, is exactly your heart is opening and just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. And I was just going to say about the point about terms like the chakra system or kundalini manifestation. These things are the ego's special labels for things that are quite practical. And this becomes very evident the more you access your repressed emotions. The ego always wants to be special, wants to be different, wants to be chosen, wants to be on a different plane to other people, wants to be superior ultimately. Um, if these things are useful for you, obviously we're not telling you to stop using them, but I definitely invite you to ask the question, what does my ego get out of this? Why is there something special that I'm given by accessing these things? Um, Again, that might create some tension, resistance, like, oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He hasn't gone there or accessed it. That's fine. But I just invite you to always ask the question, is my ego who craves superiority or inferiority, um, is there something that's being gotten from spiritual terms?
Yeah, and just just to finish off, since there's two terms, so Kundalini, as far as I know, so what do people think that is? It's a very special spiritual energy in the spine that arises and goes through all the chakras. And then there's the shaking, right? The very famous uncontrollable shaking. That's happened to me. Kundalini is literally like when the brain is rewired, the body shakes because we have nerves all over the body. And so that's a great example of like you have this special spiritual energy, the snake, right, that goes up. That sounds so special to the ego. But then your nervous system is just making your body shake because your brain is being rewired, right, in meditation or something. That's how practical and simple. And then the ego can't use that to say, look how special I am. I've activated my kundalini. It's like, no, you've just experienced a little bit of rewiring in the brain and your body just was shaking. That's it. And then the other thing with the heart chakra is literally I had this thought which was the heart chakra opening, which is just your heart opening is your the more that your heart is open, the more that you stop fighting with life and trying to find a solution when you're in pain. You stop trying to find a solution in that moment of pain and you go into the pain and then you start crying. That's literally it. You're just surrendering into the pain. But remember, this happens naturally. So if if you're fighting with life, that is part of the process too. Okay. Um, do you think that I'm just going to ask you now, Joe, do you think that because Beata asked three questions, do you think that it's better if we went to another person's question?
Yeah, let's make sure that we get something from everyone, and then
And
if
then
there's time at the end, we'll get to them all. If not in this session, then the next one.
yeah, so if we can't address the other two questions from Beata next week, we're going to answer them.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me just look through here. Um, okay, this is a good one. So this is from Elena. Oh, sorry, it just disappeared. Okay, here it is. Releasing pain. Is it possible to release pain without crying? For example, being depressed or being in pain but not crying. So the thought that came to mind is you can be in pain when the depression is pain, you know, all that stuff is pain, but releasing it, I think, is mostly, I mean, it's like 90% of it is crying. But so she said, for example, depressed. Now I know that that feeling of depressed, like you just feel low, why am I living? My life is meaningless. Nothing is going my way. I just want to disappear. That feeling, so let me share a little bit. When I couldn't cry and something in my life would trigger me, like right, like I'm a failure, I'm a loser, I see somebody that has what I want and I couldn't cry. It was impossible. That would hit me. So some deep pain was coming up and I just couldn't cry. I didn't even know that that was a thing. And so I could be depressed all day. So all day I'd have that feeling of like, I don't want to live anymore. My life is horrible. And slowly, right, this process was so painful. As I was able to cry, eventually there was a point where that the same thing could happen to me. I was living my life, something would trigger me. I would feel that depressing feeling, oh, here it is. I almost, maybe feeling a little bit suicidal. And then when I was able to just start sobbing, right, just admit to myself I'm in so much pain and I just want to cry, the depression would be gone. Like right after crying, maybe I was crying for 10 minutes, I don't know. Once it was over, I could feel that that energy was just gone. The depression was gone. It didn't come back until maybe the next trigger. And so what I was also going to say is, so is it possible to release pain without crying? I think that there's sort of like three types of, I don't even know if, yeah, pain or energy in the body, which is whatever makes you cry, which is usually sadness, grief. Then there's anger and rage, which is very different to getting emotional because you just want to do something, right? And then the last one I think is the most rare, which is just fear in the body. And the way that I feel fear in the body nowadays is just through a long meditation. Like after a certain amount of time, 45 minutes, an hour, my body will just literally get goosebumps of fear. I just feel some fear in the body for a second. It comes in waves sometimes. But I would say, just to finish that, ultimately, everything will lead to crying because it's almost like, Even anger, like anger leads to crying because I see anger and rage as a kind of fight with what's going on. And when you extinguish all of that fighting energy, you just start crying because you see that the fighting didn't do anything. So, an example is you may have a memory. So, something of your childhood, somebody hurt you, your father, your mother. That already happened, right? It's done. It can't be fixed. Your father's not going to change in that moment or your mother. And so if there's a huge amount of rage, how dare he have abused me like that? Then maybe in your mind, you're almost wanting to hurt him or you're even killing him in your mind. Once all of that rage is gone, crying is going to happen because you realize that all of the fighting didn't change the past. The past is what it was. And so I think really it just comes all back to crying. And the last thing I want to say is the reason why I think you're asking that is because obviously it's still not completely effortless. And so there might be a kind of confusion like, is it just crying or is there something else? And as it becomes easier and easier, you're going to see that ultimately everything goes back to crying.
Yeah, definitely. Um, I think it becomes very clear that crying is the bodily function of releasing repressed emotion, much like anything else. Again, it's not special, it doesn't have special spiritual powers. It's like any other thing, eating, um, any other bodily function you can think of. It's the same. And I think, to be succinct as well, I think the answer is just no. But the ego or whatever, well, it's very confusing to not be able to see that clearly. Um, and yeah, depression is just the symptom of repressed emotion.
Yeah.
It's not, depression is not a release of sadness, or it's not a release, it itself is not a release. It's a state in which repressed emotion puts you in. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so I'm just gonna go because I think we still have some time. I like this question. So this is another question from Beata. She says, going deeper. Um, my purging has significantly decreased. Ego layers are very subtle and way harder to detect. How does one go deeper on the awakening journey? Thank you. So I think the what will be most relatable is just meditation. So I'll just say it. So the meditation, psychedelics, I think most people won't go out there and buy psychedelics, but definitely psychedelics. Um, and I just want to say, don't take too much. Be very, very careful of how much you take because it can be something that you can't even imagine is that difficult. And I think the final thing would be, and then I want to talk a little bit about meditation, not medication, meditation, is the other thing you can do is literally look for things that will trigger you, which is kind of a funny thing. So it's like if here's an example of something that used to trigger me, and then for a while I was like avoiding it. Um, Videos of people having arguments, right? Like on the street and in a restaurant, that would make my heart rate go, I was like literally feeling unsafe. And after a long time of avoiding, I finally said, wait a minute, maybe I should just face this and just watch and watch as many as possible. And so anything that you think would trigger you, like it could be any video you can imagine, situations in life, speaking to people. Um, I'm trying to think of one. I forgot it, but it was funny. It was like, um, I mean, anything, even something when you're just alone, something that's out of your comfort zone, which could be exploring rage more. I mean, anything that you can feel is like new territory. That will make it, come up.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a more time spent in these states, the more you access and the deeper you go. So, but again, I'm not sure it's something that can be forced necessarily. You might feel drawn to meditation, a longer meditation. And when we talk about meditation, we mean rest, being in a environment where you don't have distractions and allowing what comes to come. you can, I suppose, try to place your attention on your bodily sensation. Of course, you'll notice the endless activity of the mind, but there's no goal. There's no goal of doing anything. And enough time spent alone in this state of rest, things will come up and come. Um, but you'll know what's right for you. But I think that, and then as Steve said with the hallucinogenics, but I think we've both had very distressing experiences with high doses. So maybe not the best, guides for that. But all those saying, our experiences have been very critical to the journey. But the lesson learned was certainly controlled small amounts in which you're able to. It's like meditation, just but really concentrated. Like the things that come up just come up in a much more concentrated, condensed fashion.
Yeah. And I was going to say that it is interesting. So, like she said, ego layers are very subtle and way harder to detect. It's so interesting how this stuff happens in the mind because, nowadays, to describe my experience, it's very interesting. It's like um, I could be walking in the park. This is kind of funny to say. I could be walking in the park, and the way that I'm experiencing my vision and everything, it's like my ego wants to say, wow, this is almost completely enlightened. And then usually in the park, I have a really strong release of I go into the forest and I just sob every day. It's like a different thing. And so I can feel this like love that people would call divine. It's not divine, but it's this like unbelievable love. And then I'll just step back on the trail where people are walking. And after like feeling this like unbelievable unconditional love, I could just feel rage that somebody like, like crossed my path or something. And without them seeing, I just like say something horrible. And then after that, I'm just back to just looking at the park and everything and feeling blissful. And so the journey is so long and there are so many layers to go through that even when you feel that you've, gone very deep, there's more and more. And I think that once once you start to experience a big change where you're like, wow, for the first time in my life, I'm feeling this, then you almost get an appetite for going deeper. And this is a very weird thing that happens because when I meditate, I'm literally meditating, sometimes just to rest, but it literally to pull up more pain. And when I do, like I did it 2 days ago, an hour and a half, I literally feel, like you said the ego layers are very subtle. Well, they become like they don't bec that suddenly it's there, and then there's more anger and there's more I could, be triggered and then I have to cry. And if I didn't meditate, it would be more soft. And so there's almost this weird game of like, what if I just never meditated again and just enjoyed this, whatever stage I'm on? But I know that I'm not free. I can see it all the time. And so I meditate to pull up the pain, to release it. And that's just you just keep going, right?
Did you want to do one of Sienna's? I know we
Yeah.
kind of
Oh
addressed
yeah,
it.
this is
Yeah.
an interesting one. Yeah. Okay, so this is Sienna's question. So symptoms. Hey everyone, since I've had derealization and depersonalization in a ceremony after an overwhelming amount of grief, my nervous system has been kind of in a trauma state. First, I was in derealization, depersonalization for months, totally out of body with full-on terror thoughts. Now I'm in fight or flight every moment. I can't rest besides sleeping. My ego won't let me take a nap even. It feels too dangerous, I guess. I experience visual disturbances every day, brain fog, and tinnitus. Does anybody else experience this or have any tips? What can it mean? Do you have anything or
Yeah, well, I kind of addressed it in the comments a bit, but it makes me think of being on mushrooms, to be honest. You know, when the ego is in such, and by ego, whenever we say ego, we just mean sense of self, just like the self, the thing that you're used to, like me, Joe, like the thing that it is in my head. Um, that thing has been dented or compromised or it's pushed around and it doesn't recognize itself and it will just freak out beyond all belief. And when that happens, um, the nervous system interprets that as being in real danger. You know, you're in constant attack from tigers territory. Um, and I say mushrooms because your ego, your sense of self just gets obliterated or like distorted beyond any recognition. And the same thing happens when you feel that. If you've had such an experience, immense terror that comes with that, the terror is the ego's terror. Um, I guess that's more of a sort of my explanation of that state. Um, because I think it's about feeling safe as well. You know, these are all like mental things, and I'm not that doesn't diminish how unbelievably awful the experience is. It's truly horrible, and there's nothing you can really do other than on some level know that you are safe. You can look around the room, see that I'm in a safe environment. Maybe I'm lying on my bed, I'm sitting in a chair. I feel absolutely awful and the fear is overwhelming, but I know fundamentally there's something in my body that knows I am safe. And I mean, that in those instances of, um, extreme experiences are what can help get you through. Um, to when it's sort of subsided a bit. Um, I'm just really looking at the question. Did you have anything to add to what I just said, Steve?
Yeah, because the derealization, depersonalization, I just wanted to talk like specifically about that
Mhm.
because what that is, and especially psychology says, first of all, that there's something wrong, like, oh,
Yeah.
this shouldn't be happening. And it is something that happens in the way that you're experiencing your vision. And I think they usually describe it as you feel like you're in a dream, but in a kind of scary way, instead of because you're awake, right? And you're in real life. And yet the way that you're experiencing things is like you're in a dream, which makes it feel like there's something wrong with you. Like, why am I feeling this? And what's actually happening, I said this in the comments, is that, you said the ego, which is like literally this thing in the mind. It's almost like an image of you, a projection, right? Just like at the movie theater, there's a projector. And the image, the image on the screen, you can see the image, so you can say, there's the image exists. And yet, I think I said this in one of my videos, when you're watching, on the screen, there's an explosion in the movie. Do you get hurt by the explosion? No. So it means that, yeah, there it is. It exists on the screen, and yet it's an illusion. It can't hurt you. It can't, there's this space, right? So let me just see if I can connect the dots in my mind. So, all right. So the ego in the mind, it's so much more powerful and has its like tentacles almost wrapped around our entire experience, including the five senses. And so imagine like the eyeballs represent your vision, right? And then imagine that my hands are like the ego's hands on your vision. And this happened when we were probably like 7 or 8 years old. And before that, when we were very small, these hands, the ego didn't exist in the mind. So you were just experiencing the senses, right? And so once this was in place, you got used to it, and then this is normal. This is what is considered normal. Everybody lives this way. You're not even aware of it. Now, when big shifts starts happening in awakening, this grip that the ego has on your vision, it's kind of losing its grip on it. And so even if it loses its grip a little bit like that, it's trying to do this, but now it's kind of losing its energy. That is the depersonalization that feels very, very strange. And it shows how much the ego is affecting how you experience your vision, which is the inability to enjoy it the way the children do. And so it is terrifying. People feel like they're completely going crazy, losing their mind. They're not going to recover. Like the ego is literally saying, you're becoming more and more crazy. And if you keep going down this road, you can't go back to being normal, which is kind of funny. And and the last thing I want to say is that whatever experience is difficult will basically eventually just go away, and you just get used to that. And in fact, I think that if you think about it, that is the vision becoming more pleasurable. But in the beginning, the ego is just fighting for its life to keep its control on your vision. But eventually you get used to it. And then later it will become very, very pleasurable.
Yeah. And I guess also in the sort of practical sense, because it's interesting for us to talk about this. And then I think about when you're in this state, it's like useless. It's just a horrible, horrible state to be in. And being able to understand or interpret it doesn't make it better, doesn't make anything better, which is, so distressing. Um, so again, I pointed to this a bit in the comment, but practically in the moment, you could notice that this is happening. You notice the resistance because it's the desperate, desperate, trying to reassemble the ego from a state of, derealization that is the pain, the resistance to simply there's a shift that's happened temporarily. The ego is freaking out. Immense fear has arisen. That fear has put my body into fight or flight. But you can notice that this pain is there. You might be able to get a small amount of distance where you're seeing that the pain is there and not being all consumed in like I'm terrified and I can't do anything. It won't be like, oh, I can just think that and it will do this, but you can begin to do that. And that's that distance that I was sort of speaking about. And in that distance, you can have a little bit of um uh release from the all-consuming suffering that occurs.
Yeah, and I just want to say, when we talk about this stuff, it can sound like now that it's no longer happening to me, oh, that I can just talk about it. It's so easy. But when it was happening to me, it was like a living nightmare. And I felt completely lost. And every day I felt worse and worse and worse. And I was just lost in that. And I felt like I was becoming insane and I was losing my mind. I would take walks and I'd have this like music playing. And it's odd because I could feel that I was feeling kind of peaceful, but my body was just beginning to get used to the peace. And so the ego was like, this piece is like, this is insanity. Think about how crazy that statement is. The ego is saying that this is too much peace. And too much peace is crazy. You shouldn't go down there. It's too much, it's too silent.
Yeah.
Um, and so I just wanted to stress that I can talk about it now like it's easy. It's not happening to me anymore. But back then, I also didn't have anybody to tell me what was happening. So it made it really like a nightmare. And now I can tell you that if that was happening to me for months, you can think of it as like something leaving your body or leaving your mind. Like every day that you're experiencing that, or a percentage, 1 more % today is gone because that's what happened to me. I never thought it would end, but one day it did. So it really was every day that I experienced, it was leaving my system, my nervous system. And there is probably a certain threshold that it's like, now this is enough, and then you stop experiencing it. And so, you know, I think just us talking about this, I think can be very helpful to Sienna or anybody experiencing that, because to say that it's like absurdly difficult, all these words that we can use, ridiculously, impossibly difficult, still doesn't really describe what it is. It's the worst.
Yeah. How are we doing with the time, Steve?
So it's an hour now.
Okay. Well, we maybe we can do one more.
Yeah, okay. So I think Beata had another question. So okay, I did the going deeper. Oh, okay. So her question was about disgust. I am dealing recently with disgust. I have realized that it's my ego creating disgust in order to push people away so that they don't get close to me and hurt as it has happened in the past. Any advice on how to work with that? So my mind just said people will see a commonality that it's always back to the same thing, but disgust is just like that other part of you that I mentioned, which is you feel no love for your daughter. So that's you can think of as one beata. That's like one part of your ego. And another one, I mean, this is similar, is disgust. And again, remember how we said that this should be fun. Maybe in the beginning it won't be, but it becomes fun to become an actor. And so when you feel disgust, and I wonder if it's only because she said with people, I wonder if it's like somebody that's getting close to her or in general, but it doesn't matter. I guess it could be both. If it's just somebody that you see on the street and you'll never see again.
Mm.
And it's the same thing, which is if the disgust is here in this moment, it's an opportunity for you to try to become the disgust character. How does it speak? What would it say? And it would say pretty horrible things that the ego is going to judge. And so one thing that you can do is just again express what is this the disgust want to say. I'm trying to think of something like um yeah, there's some funny ones like whatever it is, it could be racism, it could be how they're dressed, how they look, it doesn't matter what it is. And then you just say it in the most disgusted way. So it's like look at how that person's dressed. Disgusting. I'm disgusted at this person. I don't even want to look at them. I don't want to see them. And that's just light, right? You can go much deeper into maybe a little bit of violence in your mind or something. But yeah, it's just going into the disgust until it's kind of you feel kind of oh, I guess this is a good point. Um if you always kind of experience the disgust, but you're never doing that. You're never really committing to becoming the disgust. It's a very kind of unsatisfactory experience. It's kind of like it keeps bothering you. Like here it is in the background. Oh, I'm disgusted at this person again. I'm going to wait until it goes away. And it keeps coming back. And so instead of you letting it float, you kind of like take it and you're like, I'm going to become it now. And I'm going to express it in words and things. And you just do it every time. Just yeah, every time.
Yeah, I was just going to add also that disgust is, quite a pronounced form of judgment, which means that that which you are disgusted by will be something that you cannot tolerate, your ego cannot tolerate within you. So if you're disgusted by someone's behavior, like anything, I don't know, they eat with their hands instead of with their cutlery or something, or it could be anything. Again, invite yourself to look at you doing that behavior and how much and how unacceptable your ego perceives it to be as a part of you, the you that it finds to be acceptable. So, you see something that triggers disgust, notice what it is that you're disgusted at, and then see that that part of you, the person or aspect or part of you that wants to do that has been rejected by the ego. It's saying that's not tolerable, that's not acceptable, it's not lovable, it's not safe to be doing whatever that is. So you can see that now. You can just by your reaction, I see this action, disgust arises. Me doing that is something that I have rejected. And then you can see it. And the more you see it, seeing is an act of love as well, as in seeing is starting to accept. And again, you can start to have fun with that. You can notice if it's a behavior that you're disgusted by in private, do that behavior. See how much resistance there is to the things that you're disgusted by. Um, and that part of you will uh, no longer be rejected to the degree that it was and ultimately accepted. And there will be no cause for disgust. And you're not rejecting disgust, like Steve said. The just this is the part of you that is disgusted is part of that as well.
Yeah. And I just thought of two things. So one is there's often a confusion about this stuff, like the emotions arise or these thoughts arise, and we can get confused as to what we're doing in our mind versus with actual people. And so I'll just give you an example. Like let's say that I'm going to speak to someone. Let's say I'm afraid to speak to someone, I see them, and then there's disgust, which I think that it's more clear to say like really deep judgment. I think it became more clear in my mind, like really, really deep judgment of any kind. So let's say that I want to talk to that person, and then there's disgust before I walk up to them. And so what you can literally do is you can say whatever you want about that person silently so that they don't hear you. And then when you're done with it, when you feel satisfied that you've looked at the disgust and then it's kind of gone, then you walk up to the person. So this is how you manage these things. It's not like you're disgusted and then it almost seems like, oh, I don't like that person, so I'm just gonna feel disgusted and walk away. You can do both. You can kind of like um kind of release the disgust. And when it's been released, then you can talk to the person. So both things can happen. And then the second thing I'm trying to remember, oh, it's a great example of something that I did, which was I was watching one of, I think, not everybody knows Artem is one of the, spiritual teachers that we follow, and he does lives. And so I was sitting in my living room looking at the screen, the TV screen, and it was, Artem, the spiritual teacher, and he's speaking to someone, right? And so doing this practice of, oh, look at this, look at this deep judgment arising for the person that's speaking, right? This disgust. And so for the first time, I literally pointed at the screen at the person that was doing the thing that I was disgusted at. And what he was doing is he kept interrupting Artem over and over, interrupting. And I really, that there was even rage, right? So what I eventually did is I paused it right when the guy was looking at the screen and I said, "You're a terrible listener. Shut up. You're a terrible listener," and a lot of other stuff. And then after that, I was like, wow. So first there's that rage, that there's the judgment, but then that means that in certain moments I'm a terrible listener. And then it was very obvious for me to see that in certain moments I maybe I'm not listening to the person and I'm waiting for them to finish so that I can speak. That's an example of being a bad listener. It doesn't mean anything. I'm not a bad person or anything, but isn't that funny, right?
And then an extension of that in terms, you're seeing the part of you that is a bad listener that wants to be seen. You could, as an extension of like doing the you're a bad listener thing, embody being a bad listener and pretend that you're interrupting someone over and over again because you just want to, because you just don't care what they have to say. That part of you is there that has doesn't care at all what the other person says. They're speaking, it's like, shut up, I want to speak now. And you could do like a role play where you are so arrogant and just dismissive and, and all of these things. Because again, we judge that as a bad thing, but it's a part of you that's there that wants to that is there. And we've said that it's not acceptable, but embodying it in a role play, for example, even with no one else, just to the wall or to like an image of someone on the computer, is immensely alleviating. To do, if you've always thought of yourself as a good listener and then you role play being the worst, most arrogant listener you could possibly imagine, it's another form of an exercise that leads to further acceptance. Yeah.
And yeah, just to finish, I was going to add, what's the point of this? Because everything we've talked about is sort of the same thing. Oh, this thing is here in this moment. Let me try my best to embody it, to feel it, to release it. The point is that if you're able to explore these things honestly, you're just learning to love yourself. So there's a part of you that can't listen, a part of you that's cold. And so if you explore these parts enough that they become familiar and comfortable, and then you notice that you're having fun with them, that's when you know there's no more judgment. You can be brutal, right? Like I said, to the screen. I'm pretending I'm saying to the guy, I'm brutal, and I really mean it in that moment as a as an expression. But then after I'm done, I laugh because it's funny. It's like, wow, look at how much resentment, right, over a person just doing almost nothing. And so the point is you're just learning to love all of you. And the more that you love of you, then there are endless like shifts that happen. Like you, if you're someone that has a mind that is constantly um, saying how bad you are, then when you love these parts, that's one thing that you will see slowly disappearing because it's like you're learning to love all of these characters in the mind that there was so much judgment for. And just exploring them is embracing them and loving them. And then there's not that much of judgment anymore coming up.
Yeah. And it's only the ego that thinks any of this is serious. So even if you're completely wrapped up in it and you really feel that it is serious, you can think, even if you don't know it or feel it, but just you can say that, even though it's not my experience, I know that it's not serious, even though it feels like it totally is, because it is honestly the biggest joke of all time to see how dramatic everything is from the perspective of the ego, and it's just not in the end.
Yeah, they're just like images that are happening in the mind. Just like I could sit here and create things in my imagination. It's the same thing, but it's just tied to emotional pain. And
Mm,
that's why it has to be cleared. People think that, oh, the ego doesn't exist. Yeah, it doesn't. But the nervous system, which is the body that had to push down the emotions, that's real. And that's why you have to do all this stuff to unravel the illusion of the ego by releasing and releasing.
yeah, and that's not to diminish the actual experience you're having. Of course, I don't mean what you're experiencing isn't real. Of course, it's a real experience.
Yeah.
So it doesn't diminish the actual suffering, but yeah, just good to know. Great. Okay, should we wrap it up there then, Steve, for today?
Yeah, and then just let everybody know that I think next week we'll do the same thing, right?
Yeah, so every week, obviously the community is brand new and we're trialing ways of engaging with the members who are in there now. Thank you everyone who's in there at the moment. You're the first guys in there. You're sort of defining, helping how things will go, getting your feedback on what's helpful, what's more helpful, what's less helpful will be really valuable for how we move forward. But the plan at the moment is to do sort of one of these videos a week, addressing the things that you want to be addressed in sort of a longer dialogue format. And then, of course, um, we're in the forum every day. So we'll be uploading these videos to the classroom. So there'll be like a catalog that will emerge over time. Um, but yeah, that's everything for now, I think.
Yeah. Thank you,
All right.
everyone.
Yeah. See you next week.